Hello and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And on this episode, I have Neil Fairclough with me from the band the Deccan Traps. Did I say that right? Did I, Neil?
The Deccan Traps.
Deccan Traps.
Yeah.
and the reason why I keep slipping into the wrong kind of name is that Neil is also the current bass player in the current touring band Queen. So there's, a lot of people, their eyes will be opening even wider knowing that. So not only is this a great album, here it is, which I've featured a couple of times on my weekly playlist because it's been in and out of the CD tray here a lot. It's great to hear a new British rock band. As many of you know, I love bands like Cats in Space and Sun in Man, and this is another band to stick alongside those bands. It's absolutely wonderful songs, anthemic choruses, great guitar playing, wonderful musicianship. And so I've got lots of questions about this and also what it's like to currently playing Queen as well. So welcome, Neil. I'm going to start with this. So first of all, as I keep almost calling it the John Deacon Traps by accident, tell me about the band's name and how you came together.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Phil. This is fantastic. Basically, I think the name came about. I think, was it John? We sort of decided on, you sort of throw a few names into the hats, and this kept coming back up. And we thought, I asked a few people about, what do you think about these names? And everyone kept coming back to this. So, the Deccan Traps is actually, I think it's let me get this right. It's a sort of, fossilized prehistoric lava flow. Mm-hmm. That's like the biggest, volcanic thing that happened, many millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago. But I've already realized that if people don't like us, there'll be different names, I'm sure, that they'll be calling us that rhymes with that. But the thing about it is, I think that's always hard, isn't it, with bands, is, how do you grab the attention of people? Because if you get it wrong, it can kind of mess things up. So you're always a little bit nervous, like, I hope this works, but it's been positive so far. And the guys in the band, well, what's great about it is we're all sort of old friends of a certain age, but we've known each other since the late teens. In the case of my sister, who's on there, Lois, all my life, obviously.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Lois and John are married, but John's my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And so for this album, we're the writers. I was writing stuff, and John and Lois were doing stuff, and we just decided to sort of pool our resources, and just give it a go, because we were going to start writing for other people, which we did start doing. To cut a long story short, we just ended up saying, let's just do this ourselves. You know what I mean? Because we care about it. We're going to want to get it right, and we ended up, I think, back in 2014, everything started to come together. We thought, right, let's do this. Got in touch with all the guys, and Johnny Hayes on guitar, Neil Edwards on keyboards, and Andy Treacy on drums. We've known each other since, like I say, 18, 19, 20, early 20s. Went to music college, different, not necessarily the same places, but and we played in bands all throughout our lives. Everyone went off doing different things, playing with different people, and it's just been a really nice, complete circle. Let's do it with the guys, and got together. We recorded in Parr Street in Liverpool, which is sadly now defunct. A lot of these brilliant studios that had a huge space. Closing down, obviously, and obviously this. I don't think anyone needs to be reminded about how expensive these things probably are and stuff. Yeah. I think it's reopening in another way. I'm not sure where, but so I feel really fortunate that we managed to do that. Went in, record the drums, the bass, and guitars pretty much live as a whole, and then made things like keyboards and piano and everything else on top of that, So there we go. And Ricardo, the vocalist, our secret weapon, is not only a fabulous vocalist, but fantastic frontman. And he actually is another Queen connection is that he was, I think he played Galileo, in the We Will Rock You show.
Yeah, yeah.
Back in maybe the mid to late 2000s. And, but I managed to sort of reach out to him through a friend of mine, and he got his number to me, and I asked him about this. Would you be interested? He said, I'm very interested. And he heard the tracks and he was completely on board. He completely got it and he delivered it. We demoed them up, but just having Ricardo put his vocal on there, really, just the sprinkling, isn't it? I think as well that it's important to be able to get across the emotions, and so people dive in with you into a little adventure, and I think he does that,
But the other thing here that a lot of people watching, listening may not be aware of, you have you mentioned that your vocalist, your secret weapon, but another secret weapon is Brian May from Queen actually plays on this album. I mean, I think we need to explore how you've just described how the band came together. You've known each other for ages, but at what point does Queen, the band, enter your life? So you end up playing with them, and then Brian May ends up playing on your fabulous album.
Well, this is one of those interesting stories because I'm pretty sure that most people, when they were a kid, unless you absolutely hate them, are somehow involved in Queen. I think they're one of those bands that grabs you when you're young,
Yeah.
And it's the same for me. I've got there's 4 siblings. I'm the youngest, and a brother and 2 sisters. And Lois had an album called A Day at the Races, and the Queen Live Killers album. So we're talking about 1979, 1980.
Yeah.
I would say, if she was going out, I'd say, can I listen to that album? Because I'd hear it all the time. And I just, from then on, I just got, even before I started playing, I wasn't a musician or anything. My brother and my sisters played and stuff, but I was like, this is amazing. I love this. And I think I got Queen's Greatest Hits was the next thing, because I think that came out in 81. And that was it, because I don't know if you remember on the album, it would say the tracks and then it would point to what albums they're from.
That's right, yeah.
So that was the adventure for me. Right, okay, I want to get this album. And as you describe every week, the feeling of saving up money and, there's this album, 2 or 3 tracks on it, but the rest is a mystery,
Mm-hmm.
So that was it, really. And I got into lots of different kinds of music. I got into playing music myself. And that was pretty much it. I was even doing things like jazz and funk and blues, lots of different genres of music, which I love. And then I got back into listening to a lot of the rock that I grew up with. And fast forward to 2010, I was playing with a really good friend of mine. He's called Elio Pace. I've known him for decades now. We played together in something called the Billy Joel Songbook. It's like a theatre tour that he does. And again, he's one of these artists, isn't he, Billy Joel? With
brilliant art.
With great albums and stuff. So that's always a pleasure to do. But before that, he was asked to be the MD at Terry Wogan's, I guess it was his kind of swan song. He'd retired, but he came back to do this thing called Weekend Wogan. It was like...
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And there was the red button, I don't even remember. Well, I was in the house band. So we'd have... we'd have charts. Elio was the MD. All the guys were in the band, and we would have visiting artists come every week. We'd do some of our own tunes, or a cover, or a couple of Elio's things. But it was great because you never knew what was coming up. I mean, week to week, it was actually hard work, but it was a thrill, And of course, I never moved from Manchester. I still live in Manchester, so I was getting like a 5:30 a.m. train, every week, to do this. And we rehearsed on the Saturday, and the show went out on a Sunday. But one week, there's one of the the producer was Alan Boyd, I think it was, and his lovely Scottish brogue said, I heard him as I was talking to someone say, hey, and next week we've got Brian May. And I literally went, excuse me, did you just say Brian May? So all that visceral feeling of, forget the musician in me, just the childhood, it's Brian May, Elio managed to convince him, because I don't think Brian was going to particularly play. He was working with a lady called Kerry Ellis, who's a great West End singer. And they were going to come on, do a couple of songs. But he was persuaded to bring his Red Special. and he ended up. We played with them, which was a thrill.
Yeah.
And he was lovely actually, because he was going through with the guitarist, but he couldn't get near the guitarist. The nearest he could get was right in front of me. And, whether by accident or by design, because I think he'd heard from Elio that, I said, oh, my bass player won't forgive me if you don't play with us or something, just making a joke. And he was going through stuff, but I was just like transported to being, 10 or 11 years old again, going, so, try and remain professional,
Yeah.
But we ended up doing that. And they jokingly said, I think Kerry said, oh, he's a bit good, we should nick him. And I was laughing it off, being polite. But it turned out that the month afterwards, they wanted us to do this Proms in the Park. So we ended up doing that. Cut a really long story short, the following year, I ended up doing the Anthems tour, which is the tour they were doing with the album that they were doing together. And that kind of morphed into the very first... it was Queen and Adam Lambert, and it was at the MTV Awards, Global Icon Award they were getting. And it was in Belfast, in the arena. I still thought it was for Brian, but Roger Taylor's drum tech, Nigel, was who'd been working with us on that previous tour, helping out Rufus, who was Roger's son with Brian's tour. He said, no, mate, it's Queen, and so I'm what? No, what do you mean? Anyway, it was, and it turned out to be that, and everything else is hysterical, as they say. History.
But what was? Obviously, you've grown up as being a huge fan of Queen. I'm struggling to get my own words out here because I'm thinking of what that must be like to be told. Queen is one of the not only one of the biggest bands in the world, but one of the biggest brands in the world relating to music. And obviously, there's so much baggage and history connected to them that you say, "Oh, it is Queen, by the way." And what was it like walking on the stage for that first time to play with Queen? Were you nervous? Were you? How were you feeling? Where were you mentally?
I was nervous because of how much, obviously I've done a lot of stuff with being a musician. I've played not necessarily with people as big as Queen, but so I knew I had to know my stuff. Plus, we'd had a week at Kato Studios in I can't remember where it is, but somewhere in London, and that was kind of freaky. But it gave us at least time for me to realise, okay, this is happening, and it was the first time I met Adam. And Adam was, I guess it was his first. I know they'd done something together on American Idol, hadn't they? With the two finalists. And you've got to remember as well, Phil, that everything I did with them, I just thought it was a one-off, So everything, I could have died and gone to heaven when Brian first arrived at BBC Radio Theatre, So, I think it's what made it more incredible was the fact that there were lots of big stars of the day, Justin Bieber and I think Katy Perry and all these massive people were there as well. But all I could think of was, don't screw up, and and for years, and even now, I get these like, is this actually happening? But I think it's more of that, how much it means to you as a child through to adulthood. You know what I mean? And but the Queen's body of work is just amazing. It's the musicianship, the writing, the harmonic color, that, they can do simple stuff, they can do complex stuff, and they can be funky, they can be metal, all of this stuff.
Well, that's so true because, apart from bands like probably Thin Lizzy and Quo, I'm trying to think of other bands where they were on top of the pops and they could play big festivals and arenas and they could have hit songs and they could have deep album cuts. So Queen crossed over every genre, really. They were a rock band, they were a pop band, they were everything band. When you, as a bass player, when you were learning these songs, did you just stick to what? Because these songs are so well known. Did you dare go outside of the John's bass lines and be yourself, or were you kind of told this is who you are? This is
okay. Well, it's a good question. I absolutely stayed within the realms of what John Deacon was doing, even though John live didn't necessarily stick to absolutely everything he did. But there are certain things like in Killer Queen, Fastidious and Precise. If you don't do that bass fill,
Yeah.
It sounds odd.
Yes.
The song's correct. You're playing. It's all fine. But I think that even an audience, even if they don't know what it is, they'd go, "Oh, that was odd. What was that?"
Yeah.
So I sort of, for me, being a fan and also wanting to do it right as a musician, I was kind of like, "Oh, I must get that bit." And what does John do there? But I have to say, both of them, both Roger and Brian, said, "Don't feel you have to stick to." You know what I mean? Just be, within reason. I mean,
yeah, of course.
I'm not going to change another one bites of dust.
No.
But what I mean is that they were saying, it's just, right, you want you to have a good time and this, that, the other. They were really generous. But I gave myself those parameters, but it was important to me, There were occasions, though, there's the fast bit in I Want It All, where it goes, it goes down and goes, yeah. I think it's kind of like more like eighth notes, that with the fast bit. I would do a little bit of, I'm a big fan, which you might see later, of a band called Tower of Power. They out of Oakland, and their bass player, Rocco Prestier, was this 16th note sort of demon, which worked amazingly with them. So I would sneak in little things like because I felt it gave it more driving force, and as long as I wasn't picked up on it, or I would say to them, "Is everything all right?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give them the opportunity to say, "Well, I don't
say
know
what you're doing." Yeah.
They were fine. They were loved it. It's probably an arrangement thing, or if there's a particular thing that they want you to stick on bass wise, maybe I've slid somewhere that, up the octave or something. So, do you know what? I think it's best if little discussions, but literally I could, 2 or 3 times that's happened in the 13, 14 years I've been with them, you know what I mean? So they're very accommodating. Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing, isn't it? To take on board here. You've been with them that long. You've been in them as longer than some bands are even together. I mean, that's the, I mean, brilliant story. I mean, Neil, what album, because you just mentioned a couple of names there. I mean, what album or musicians made you want to turn professional or take up the bass?
Well, I'd have to say that 2 bands come to mind as soon as you say that, and that is The Police and Level 42.
Of course, yeah.
So what it was is that, again, my sisters and my brother, had encouraged me about different albums. But one of the things is, funnily enough, ironically, it was a friend at school who was a guitarist, massive AC/DC fan, and he said, "Yeah, let's form a band," and I'll go, okay, maybe I'll play. What shall I play? And my sister said, "Why don't you play bass? It's cool, you know what I mean? It's a great instrument." And she showed me Mark King on, it must have been an old top of the. We're talking early 80s.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I went, "Yeah, it's great that." So I literally said, "Okay, I think I'll do bass," and I got into that. My brother already played guitar. My other sister Sue played piano.
Wow.
Both of my sisters sang. My dad was a huge. He was a piano player, not professionally, but he loved Oscar Peterson and who was his other big guy, Errol Garner. So there was always music around the house. George Benson, he'd love, in his car, he'd have the cassettes, So I thought, yeah, no one's doing that. I'll play bass, So because of bands like The Police and Level 42, it's sort of more, who influenced those guys? And so when you look into it, like Stanley Clarke was a big influence on Mark King. Stanley Clarke, Return to Forever, who's in that, Chick Corea, Alden, and then to bands like Weather Report. And then I sort of went, so I was into the fusiony stuff, that's amazing, and of course Jacko. But then there's, then I started to go back a bit through college and other musicians to 50s and 60s jazz stuff and then earlier bebop stuff. So my interest was growing, and then salsa, all sorts, all right across the board, because I knew that if I was going to, at that time, I was interested in doing sessions and playing with different people, that you have to be au fait with all these things because you don't know what's going to come up. So is that? But I always had in me the I wanted to write, and I didn't really understand this until probably into my mid 20s, even though I'd started writing stuff. I think I realized actually that's where I'm happiest, because I love playing with lots of different people. But I often find sometimes you can turn around and after 30 years, sometimes you've lost yourself. You've done everything for everyone else. But where are you, So, yeah, I think that's what got me into the writing. I had a band. There's some influences here, I'll tell you, but I had a band called Pocket Central. It had 5 horns in it. We started off doing Tower of Power and Stevie Wonder and James Brown, Earth, Wind and Fire covers. I started writing for that, and which was another learning curve, writing for horns and stuff. And we had a lead singer. And then eventually, after going through a couple of singers, I started to, because I was demoing up all the songs and stuff. I started to front it, but I was playing bass, and obviously people like Mark King and Sting are big influences. So I would sort of go there, but it's not because I thought myself necessarily as a lead singer, but it was just I couldn't get with the range and wanted to get the songs across. I knew it was just easier for me to do it, and obviously with a band that size, can you imagine trying to? I mean, it was almost impossible to get everybody at a rehearsal at the same time, So those bands were there. I think the interesting thing about Queen is that they obviously had a huge influence between them. I mean, Brian obviously bought the rock stuff, though, even though he was a big fan of the Temperance Seven, was it? Like the jazz thing. And when you listen to things like Good Company, I mean, people who haven't heard Queen, if you play them that track and say that that Dixieland sound, that's all Brian. It's mind blowing, and especially when, what was it? Did they have 16 track then? Maybe 24.
Yeah,
but they didn't have infinite digital tracks, did they? It's a bit like the Beatles. They didn't. What they achieved is mind-numbingly incredible, isn't it? So I think there was always at the core of it the musicianship side of it, and not just the technical aspect of it, because you don't necessarily have to be a technician to be a great musician, but their willingness to have influences. I know that people talk about, the game, they started to really shift and try the thing, but even if you go back to Sheer Heart Attack, bring back that Leroy Brown and on the following album, Night at the Opera, Lazy on a Sunday Afternoon, these kitsch sort of pastiches of.
I agree. I would agree that they started to shift on Sheer Heart Attack as fast as that. They were already kind of breaking out of any kind of themed silo that fans were trying to stick them in. They were just breaking out in every direction. Yeah, because I guess Queen 2 is probably the closest. Is it proggy? I mean, I would say, that's the closest to prog they got. And then the first one was very hard rock, wasn't it? But Sheer Heart Attack, they're breaking out into lots of different things. But I think the other thing, of course, is that each of them wrote, but each of the songs that they wrote still sounded part of Queen. They still...
yes. Yeah, you're right. That was always the thing that really struck me, was that how did they... I've talked to Brian about this, and I'm fascinated, although, I always remember that I think we probably forget that. I wonder whether artists get bored of themselves before anyone else. If you think about when you start making an album, you've lived with a song, you've written it, you've lived a song, you've demoed it, then you record it, then you do the promo, then you tour it. By the time you're probably thinking, oh, if I never hear that song again, which to us is like, how can you be sick of those songs, But I wonder whether... sometimes I'd pick my moments talking to them about albums, and how they made them. But I always wondered with John Deacon, how did he, because he wasn't a singer, by his own methods. What did Freddie take from that and say, I know what you're saying, I know what you're trying to get at, and bring out that stuff. And I think that can only be where once they'd made a decision, this is a song we're working on. In fact, I think they've said this, that once they made a decision, whoever song it was, certainly in the first sort of decade, that they would do that. So,
I mean, going back to your album, the Deccan Traps, there's some. I love all of it, but there are some tracks that are profound to me. There's Spellbound is one of them, because of the feel of it. if I say to people, those of you who haven't heard it, oh, it's a bit of a ballad, then I'm selling it way short because of the arrangement and the whole instrumentation of it. I mean, it's a beautiful song, and then obviously the Dream of a Thousand Nights, which is almost 11 minutes of. I mean, that track is obviously the highlight of the album.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah. Sorry.
It is to me. I mean, that one itself. I mean, did it? When you put that together, when you were putting that together with the others, did you know it was going to be that shape, that length, or did it just develop in the studio around jamming when you pulled it together? Because it's epic. I mean, that
absolutely.
Chorus is
yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, no. The answer is we didn't know it was going to turn into that because that's a great example. There are some songs on there that that maybe 70% of it was mine, or 70% of it was John and Lois, but then we worked together and we put stuff. But that is a great example of that song where John already had this choral idea, which is that's actually my son doing the choir boy.
Is it?
Yeah, he doesn't sound like that now. He's got a deeper voice than me, and he's this big.
Good timing. Yeah,
it really was. But we wanted it to not be a perfect choir boy. We wanted like a young child sort of thing. But he's always a great little singer, but he and he nailed it pretty quickly. Just what kids are like; they just do it and go, "Oh, good." Yeah. So that was then, and you'll hear that melody comes back in when Brian arrives later on to destroy all others among us. But there's a good story about that in a second. But basically the verses as well, they'd had them. I think I helped out with instead of going back to a minor, there's a major resolve before we go to this. I'm getting far too muso here. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
To the chorus, and the chorus, believe it or not, is a chorus I had from years ago with that band Pocket Central. It was it had a sort of like that same idea. And I kept saying to them, I've got something for this. I just think it needs to. And I went away and I just changed it. Obviously I'd have to accommodate the key we were in. And it was one of those things where we can't imagine it any other way. It was absolutely like, it's like it was always there, So that happened, and then there's little other sections, we were together. We were getting, how can we get to this section? Let's do this, around at pianos and guitars and stuff, And this was the thing is that when we got to the sort of fanfare bit, as we're calling it, with Brian, we'd ummed and ahed. I didn't want to assume that, because I'm sure Brian gets asked. In fact, I think he gets asked a lot to do stuff. So he has to. He's so busy. He's a very clever guy, and if it's not the wildlife or the astronomy or the stereoscopic photography or all the other things that he does, I don't know how he fits it in. But anyway, eventually we couldn't hold off anymore, and I said, right. When we did the UK and Ireland tour in 2022, which had been postponed thanks to COVID, near the end of the tour, I went to see him. He went, "Right, he'll come and sit down," and I said, "Okay, Brian, I completely understand if you don't have time." And, I was going through all the things expecting him,
Yeah.
And I said, "We've got this track and it's kind of got you written all over it." And we just thought if I didn't ask, whatever. Anyway, he said, "Yeah, just send it to me, this, that, that." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I gave him a couple of weeks to get home, and I didn't want to badger him,
of course,
so to speak. And I ended up a few weeks later. I sent it to him, but I think he got busy. He was doing stuff. And Chris and Justin, who worked with Brian in his studio, I think Chris. He said, "I'll see if Brian's available." He kept telling me. He said, "Don't worry, we'll try and get it sorted." But obviously, they must have an order of things that they've got to get through. Plus, as well, they were always working on, whether it was remasters or stuff to do with Queen, things that were going on. Anyway, the funny thing is that Chris is very funny. He rang me up one night. I said, "Oh, hi, Chris." And he said, "Hi, Neil." He said, "Look," he said, "Brian's done the track." He said, "But I'm not saying he's phoned it in. but look, just have a listen to it. And I was going, oh, right, okay, no, I'm sure it's great. Then there was a pause, and Chris laughed and went, I'm kidding, he's done about 26 guitar tracks. And, and he said that Brian was loving it, you know what I mean? He was, and I was, having spoken to Brian, he was thrilled doing it, which is always great to see, because he was saying, if I can't do something with this, who am I, you know what I mean, sort of thing. And so I was really pleased, and it was very funny of Chris, because he was obviously pulling the wool over my eyes briefly. But all I did was we gave him just said, that's the melody. And obviously what we didn't want to do is give him exactly what it was we wanted, because that's pointless, So yeah, Brian did that, and he used the D key amp, I think, on the fanfare bit, and then in the little solo section, I think he went to it was AC30s. I can't remember actually. I might have got that the wrong way around, but it really was a dream come true. I'd never imagined in a million years that anything like this would have happened. But then to get him to play on track, and in fact, the track was "Nothing Can Stop Me," but one of the lyrics is "Dream of a thousand nights of peace," and it was Brian who was talking to me about it. He said, "Yeah, it just seems a bit, it just seems a bit more grandeur, and there's lots of tracks that say, don't stop me now, or nothing can,
Yeah.
He said, and I said, you know what, Brian, I think you're right, And the more we thought about it, he's absolutely right, So the title change came as well, because I think lazily we thought, well, that's the chorus, and I do it. But what we did do is we learned a lot from, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. We did the Queen thing where you sing a note and you double track it, and triple track it, and then you do the next note for the harmony, same thing, until you get this huge sound.
Yeah, its production's brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I don't think there is any tracks that I can't say. There's nothing I'd skip over. I absolutely love all of it. I mean, the opening one has that almost like Tony Iommi Sabbathy type opening before it pulls back into lovely melody and stuff. As you say, I mean, Ricardo's singing is fantastic. Another one is The Great Divide. That's quite a long track as well, isn't it? That's another one of my favorites. And then a kind of straight ahead rock song, which I love, is Live It Up. Sandwiched between two softer tracks, Moonlight and Beautiful. But yeah, it's a great album. So I've got it in my head. What's the timeline of you joining Queen, asking Brian do you mind playing on my album, please? To like the Deccan Traps getting together. I mean, when you got the Queen gig, did the rest of the band go, oh, we're going to lose Neil now, or wow, I wonder what this could mean?
Well, actually, we the band really wasn't, because I guess 2011 is when the first thing I did. I did stuff with Queen and Adam in 2012, and 2013 was just this thing called the iHeart.
Right, so Queen was already happening in the background anyway.
Yes,
not the background, very much in the foreground for you.
Yeah.
So this your project, this one was coming along while you were actually heavily involved with Queen.
Yeah, because what was happening was we were writing and we were writing for other people. And this was going to be an album, some of the stuff with another artist. But I think sort of management got involved. One thing or another, the goalpost changed. These things happen. It's fair enough. There's no problem with that. But what it meant was it was like, oh, we've got to start again. And that's when we said, look, why don't we do it? We've got the guys, we played in different bands with each other, and let's just do our own thing. We wanted to make sure that we were happy with the production and stuff. So yeah, it was really, I think the first time we got in the studio might have been 2016 to do it. We obviously had the songs and stuff, but then to sort of say to the guys, shall we do this? And everyone went, yeah. Then we booked the room. But of course, there's a lot of things happened, which could, I won't go into it, but it's like it could sort of mean the first 3 chapters of the book. But Ricardo had something happen with his voice. We recorded 3 tracks and then he had some issue with his voice, and he couldn't. I think he'd been singing on, I think sometimes you can take, what do you call it, steroids, to get him through these tours he was doing, which he said, which is the wrong thing to do, because your body's trying to tell you something when you know what I mean. But if you sing through it just to get through them, then you can do it. So I don't even. He said it's part psychological and part physiological, but he just had an issue with his voice. So he went back to. He's from Portugal. He's Portuguese, Ricardo, but he lives. His wife's British, and they've got children. But they've relocated to Portugal because I guess his life was changing. You know, he couldn't do what he was doing. But they had a business between them that they ran. And then he started to, he just worked on it. He's a very tenacious chap, is Ricardo. And he knew what he needed to do. He went to see people who helped him out. And it was incredible. He literally, I think it was 2019, he came back and he did 9 tracks in a weekend, in I think 2 days, 3 days.
Wow.
And we're going, what's going on? And he said, he was improving all the time. So, and then now he's back. I mean, he's an incredible singer. And so then what happened to everybody was COVID. So it's like when the making of this album had, those chases, and like you see in New York streets, and then they keep shoving things like chairs and tables. It felt like that, every time we moved forward 3 steps,
something got in the way.
Go back 2 steps, and something happened. So that's why it took so long to get going. And of course, it costs money. It takes to spend that kind of money in the studio and do stuff. Sometimes we'd have to do it like, okay, well, when I've done this tour, we can do this, and blah, blah, blah. So, but it's been worth the wait because we're happy with it. And almost pretty much everybody who's heard it or seen the album, as you've just described, which is really kind. I think they've got it, I always wanted to have something how I felt with music, which was kind of, and I mean this in a good way, but a sort of escapism. We wanted people to have the album and the booklet with the characters and the lyrics and stuff, and feel like you could lose yourself for a while.
I love the artwork. I mean, there is like it is like a story and a lot of. I mean, this is the thing you're going to find out. This is all. It's like all in house, isn't it? Because Hannah May did that, and she is John and Lois's. They've got 3 girls, all very talented, and that's their eldest daughter, who doesn't do this for a living. She works stuff, but she's always had this artistic bent. You know what I mean? Wow.
She used to do these characters, and I said, "Those are amazing." And so they said, "Yeah, we could do this."
Yeah, that's
so
amazing.
She worked on it. Yeah, so it's worked out really well. So she'll be thrilled to hear that, and this is the thing, is that I think what's great about today is that, people forget that as much as we love how it was, where you could have an album and everything about the band was on there, and you could do, which I still love. The problem was, though, is unless you had a record deal, there's no way you were getting people to hear what you were doing. But the disadvantage now is that whilst you can do that now, is that things like streaming, it doesn't afford you. I think it works out as something like 10,000 streams will get you about 20, 30 quid.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that right? You probably know.
I talked to lots of people about this, and in the olden days, we look back at it through rose-tinted glasses because you had the record labels that were the gatekeepers, and unless you had a record deal, you never got anything released or all the rest of it. But obviously, it was seen then there was money around. But of course, a lot of the deals that were signed back then weren't that good anyway.
No, of course.
I think that now what you do have is a global reach. So I think it's all about building up an online community around your social media channels and your Bandcamp page and everything. And so you could, obviously, if you're going to play Cleethorpes, you might only have 4 people turn up even if you've got 100,000 followers, but you can collectively, those 10,000 or 10,000 followers might buy a CD from around the world to support you.
Absolutely.
So there are pluses and minuses. I think that from my perspective, obviously running something that's all about physical music, is that I do stream, but I stream to find out stuff, to discover things. And then when I've done that, I still want to have something tangible that I feel like I've connected to the musicians. And of course, going back to the olden days, musicians were like these people hidden away on the top of a misty mountain where you had to try and write a real letter and put a stamp on it. And hopefully the fan club secretary might pass it on to them. Whereas now you can reach out and hear back from the bass player or the guitarist who says, thanks, I'm really pleased you like that song. And I actually think this is a good thing. So I think it is difficult. And I guess my next question is that in this whole process of where you're on the cycle of this, the album is out. It took years to record, and here it is now, and Brian May's on it. What are the next immediate plans for the band?
Well, there's a little problem with the Deccan Traps. It's a good one to have, is that everyone's working and doing different things. Musicians and doing stuff. So at the moment, it's a bit like herding cats. Not cats in space. I'm sure they're together.
Impossible.
But so what we're looking at, we're trying to look at some live gigs, probably the back end of the year. I'd like to try and get a few gigs together. And we did have some plans. I'm not sure if it'll come off because Ricardo's away doing a lot of stuff. It's one of those situations where really probably this time later on in the year we'll be able to, really get together and sort something out. But I think for me the important thing is the live thing, just to prove ourselves. We've been excited about doing that. I'd like to do a video for the Dream of a Thousand Nights. I don't know yet though how. Because it's such a long track. But B, Brian, I think he's expressed interest. Maybe, I don't know, but he's busy as well. So. We'd have to see, but I think it's more a case of just keep going. This has been amazing. Thank you. To be able to come onto programs and talk about it, and there's hopefully try and get a few more. I think there's maybe something in classic rock. I don't know. So it's just getting it out there, isn't it?
I think. I mean. Just looking at the illustrations in the booklet are wonderful, as I've just shown some of them for the people who are watching. Obviously, if you're on the podcast, you'll have to kind of imagine what they're like. But I mean, I don't know whether some of those could be almost animated to create videos so that you could pick out on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. That's the other situation, is we're doing these little. John and Lois have been doing a lot of promo stuff, but again, it's that situation where things are always more expensive than you think it's going to be. So you go, let's speak to someone who animates, and you sort of go, yeah. So how much would that cost? And they're on the other end of going, hello. You pick yourself up off the floor, and it's fair enough because things cost. People can't do things for nothing. So, but you're absolutely right. We've talked about that, and I think it's an important thing to have. We've got like a little, the logo of the Deccan Traps, and I think things that can. It's a bit like Eddie with Iron Maiden. It's a genius. Or the Cats in Space.
Yeah,
guys,
exactly.
To have something like that is it's great because you can think about the band every time and you go, that's them, and especially the music. But I think with these characters that we've got there, I think they do lend themselves to being. It reminds me a little bit, I think, when we were talking about it. If I can find it, here we go. It reminds me a little bit, but not quite as grandiose. But the old
Trick of the Tail, Genesis. Yeah,
we had. I think we were talking about. Wouldn't it be nice to sort of have something to represent each song? But it's like an otherworldly place, ethereal. They're not quite human. They're not quite this. You know what I mean? There's a sort of otherworldliness about them. So you're right.
So going just touching back with Queen, what would be your favourite Queen album?
Right. Well, this goes back to how do you feel as a child? Suffice to say, I pretty much love most Queen
Yeah,
albums.
yeah.
Even albums that people think are not great. I'll say now, I have a special place for Hot Space, even though I know for a lot of people it's like, but I really feel it's one of those albums. It's not my favourite, so don't worry. But I feel it's one of those albums that if they didn't do it, they wouldn't have pushed forward.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think
All
a lot
part
of these,
story.
yeah, exactly. When people do albums that, it's like I said, they must have thought, what are we going to do? Are we going to do more of the same? And
Yeah.
even though we want that, they're probably saying, well, no, come on, we've got to do stuff.
Yeah,
so
do
I
something
think
different.
and I think some great tunes are, and Freddie's vocals, it's fantastic still, I like it. I like it when bands try things.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I totally agree.
But in answer to your question, I'm going to go with, because whenever I talk about Queen, I always think of this album. And where's it gone? Here we go. Oh, that's Steely Dan. Sorry, hang on. The little known Queen Steely Dan album. Where's it gone? Oh gosh, how can I lose it? No, here we go. I found it.
It's okay.
Now, this is the same album I was talking about.
Ah, yeah.
Because I kind of fell in love with this band through this album. Of course, for someone else, it might have been Sheer Heart Attack or whatever like that.
Yeah, of course.
And I love all those albums and A Night at the Opera.
The Day at the Races is the one.
Yeah, and when we were all moving out and doing different things, I ended up walking off with Lois's copy until a few years ago, and she said, "Have you got my Day at the Races?" My wife Davina very kindly a couple of birthdays ago got me this, which is great. And what I like about this album is I know that for some people it's a little bit softer in areas, but I think the production's great. I think all the songs are fantastic. I think Freddie's. Every song is. In fact, I'd argue for me, I don't think there's a Freddie song I don't like up to about, including The Game. You know what I mean? I think it was very consistent. You know what I mean? In fact, all of them really. But I love Longer Way. There's loads of stuff on here that I just think is great. I think that they were starting to get their song as starting to bring them shorter and together. I think they were starting to. I think this suffers from being straight after A Night at the Opera.
Yeah,
because you read about it, don't you? That they saw it as a sort of companion.
Yeah, the shadow was just too long from that, wasn't it? Really,
exactly. Yeah. And I feel that Somebody to Love, it's Bohemian Rhapsody, but it's like, how can you say that? It's nothing like it. It's a complete. You couldn't get further apart if you tried. You know what I mean? It's So yes, in answer to your question, I go with Day at the Races, but I do love Night at the Opera, and I actually think the Prophet song. That's the song I think of when I think about coming home from school, putting the headphones on, and I would put side 2 of Night at the Opera on, and it just transports me. I mean, I think that's a pretty proggy song, actually.
Yeah.
And I love all the. As some people say about, it could do with the vocal bit in the middle. I love all that. So anything I think that's what you learn from bands like Queen is that they knew how to climax. You know what I mean? That they sort of to sort of head somewhere and then give you the payoff. You know what I mean? Because they always had these amazing choruses. And Brian, he's such an. That there are obviously there are guitarists who are amazing and technically incredible and stuff. And Brian often gets embarrassed about it sometimes. So I remember we were at a sound check once, and he was kind of thinking in some distance, and I said, "You're right, Brian." He said, "Yeah." And he was saying, he said, I think he'd ended up being, or I might have mentioned, he was at some top 10 guitarist thing and won it or something. He said, it's just a bit, you know what I mean? Because he's good friends with Steve Vai and all this, all these people. And Tony's famously, they're very good friends, Tony Iommi. And
yeah.
And I was saying to him, yes, but people like Steve Vai think you're incredible. It's not. There are very few. It's like B.B. King, isn't it? You hear like, it's two notes. And you think that's B.B. King.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Brian. If you hear that, just that kind of coin scrape.
Yeah. And it's him, isn't it? Yeah.
It's him.
Yeah.
So I think that all those solos that he didn't just vibe it. He didn't just do the melody exactly. He thought about it, and each solo, I think, pretty much most of them, I think, if you do a compilation of his solos, they've got like a beginning, a
Well,
middle.
they're lyrical, aren't they?
Yes, exactly.
They're like verses without words. I remember being at school.
Exactly.
I remember being at school, and Killer Queen had just come out.
Yeah.
And hearing that solo for the first time, I even bought the sheet music for it, and the solo was so clever because it was like another verse, but without Freddie singing it. It wasn't like a typical guitar solo at all.
No.
It was like somebody singing, humming a tune, but very different to what way you'd thought the melody would go. So yeah, I totally agree. He's unique in that respect. Totally unique.
He really is, yeah. And I think to have the patience as well. I mean, the famous stories of everyone else was done and Brian's in the studio doing the thing. But I think it's having that vision, isn't it? No, this is going to work. I know that if I do this right, we'll get it. I'm sure there was many times where they decided, it's too much or whatever, but it feels perfect, doesn't it? When you listen to those songs, you know what I mean?
So finally, as obviously with the Deccan Traps, you're hoping to go out towards the end of the year. Are there any Queen plans?
Not that I know of. Do you know what? Perhaps I'll get an email out of the blue.
Yeah, just after this, probably.
yeah, let's hope so. I really don't know. I don't know either way whether they're thinking, because not that it stops anyone. I mean, look at Robin Trower, but I mean, I think Brian's going to be 78 this year, and Roger will be 76. You know what I mean? But they always seem to be up for doing it. They don't need the money, do they?
No, they don't.
They love it, and you know what? A little thing to say as well. I was so impressed with is that, and they've been consistent about this, is that they never miss a sound check. Even if we're playing the same place, same night, they don't take anything for granted. They make sure make sure things are working. They want to put on a great show. And sometimes, if we've been around the world, and I've told people this, because I can afford to sort of I'll lie in bed. I don't have to get up yet. And then I'll find out that Brian, Roger, and Adam are doing promo. They're doing interviews. They're doing, you know what I mean? Not every day, but
yeah,
they know they're not just resting on the laurels. What they've achieved even after Freddie's passing, really, to keep it in the public.
Very true.
It's incredible, really. And whatever they did, and even because I saw them with Paul Rodgers, you know what I mean, and I think I loved that as well. I went to see them in Manchester, and I know it's a different.
Yeah, it was good though. Yeah.
But I think it's it's always interesting, isn't it, when you hear people. Take on a version, But I think that's what's great about Adam is he can do a whole gamut. He can do the rock stuff. He can do the softer stuff and the funky stuff. You know what I mean? He's a good fit like that. But I know that Adam's been doing something on Broadway, I think, and I think that's running till April, I think, or March or April. So yes, I don't know. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, this fantastic album. Which is just marvelous stuff. The reason why I featured it a couple of times on my playlist videos is because it gets played a lot. I mean, where would you like people to go to find it? Because I did have a few questions saying, where can I find out about the band and where can I buy the CD from?
Right. Yeah. Well,
benefits you.
If you go to www.thedeccantraps.com, you can get the album there. There's QR codes with it. You get exclusive content, and there's 3 sort of live, just in the round, the songs. On there, and then there's a download. You can digitally download it as well, so you can take it with you in the car, or whatever. In the future, maybe we'll stream it. I don't know, but we just felt we want to do this right, and it feels right to us to do this so that people experience it, like that, And then, if you go to the Deccan Traps, I think it's official YouTube. You can see videos of there's about 5 tracks that we've had out.
Great stuff. So you
stuff.
can't stream it at the moment, but you can hear some of the tracks in advance to get a feel for it.
Yes, if you go to YouTube, absolutely. There's 5 tracks. I think Moonlight, Sun and Moon, The Great Divide,
Oh yeah,
Chain Me to the Wall, and is there another one?
Great
Oh,
track.
Live It Up. Live It Up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love that one. Yeah, brilliant.
Yes, and in fact, speaking of, there's a friend of mine, Darren Vale, who did a couple of the videos as well. There's a studio version of Sun and Moon and a sort of animated video, and then one for Live It Up, which is great of him. And then the rest of it's there. We've got plans. It's just making sure that we can. I'm one of these people that if I start saying what we're going to do and it doesn't happen, it's like, oh, it's a bit embarrassing. So,
I'll add the links at the end of the video and when I publish this to the website and also your YouTube channel, so people know where to get hold of a copy. That'd be great.
Brilliant. Thank you,
well,
Phil. Really
thanks very much, Neil. It's been fantastic to talk to you, and hopefully I'll talk to you again in the future. And look forward to hearing when you're going to play live. So thank you, and take care.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
A huge thank you to my guest, Neil Fairclough from the Deccan Traps. It's a superb album. If you like Cats in Space and Son of Man, you'll love this. Epic, anthemic rock songs, a new band, great singing, great performances. Check them out on the website, which is on the screen now, will be after I've stopped this little outro, and also check out their YouTube channel. And you can buy the album directly from their website, which is the DeccanTraps.com. Superb band. And when we finished recording, me and Neil were talking about some of our favourite albums. We talked about North Winds by David Coverdale, Ronnie James Dio, etc. So we're going to do probably something later on in the year where we just talk about music and our favourite albums as well. But that was really enjoyable. I love the stories about Brian May and Queen. I hope you enjoyed that as well. Please remember to check out the Now Spinning website at nowspinning.co.uk. Subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, on Threads, on LinkedIn, and become a patron or YouTube member, and you get to join our private Facebook group community, the WhatsApp group. You can come along to our virtual meetups down our own virtual pub called the Now Spinning Arms and get discounts on all Now Spinning magazine merch as well. Remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Please take care, and I'll talk to you all very, very soon.